Okay.
Okay, can you guys still see my screen?
Oh, we lost you again. Why? We lost
Wait,
you.
hold on. Hold on, it says.
Here we go.
Let's order on.
Oh,
It's,
again.
That's common general. That's a little, it's small. Most people they have their screen blocked like we do.
Oh, the block. Do we have to turn off a block?
Okay, so everyone's been muted. I can continue to let people in as they enter the waiting room. If you want to speak, please raise your hand or leave a comment, and we'll just try to keep it orderly. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and Susan to get us started.
Okay, Susan is just checking on Kathy as well and just grabbing another item because we have a couple computers running here in the house. So I apologize, but thank you everyone for joining us. You should be able to see on the shared screen here the file that was sent with the original meeting announcement for February 10th. So we realize that some of you are here because you were not able to attend the February 10th meeting. So this is the first of 2 info sessions. So today is February 28th. And as noted by Charlie in the email that went out to the membership a couple nights ago, the next meeting, the follow-up meeting to this info session number 2, will be next Sunday at the same time, 2 o'clock on March 7th. So again, we thank you. We're trying to provide for you. Our intention is to provide a forum for the members of the Waterford Association Incorporated to meet, to talk about these 4 items that you should be seeing on your screen or on this shared screen. Again, this is the file that went out to address these issues that have been discussed over a period of time, some longer than others, as items that should be discussed to amend. So we are talking about amending these items. During the February 10th meeting, we had the benefit of having attorney Catherine Marion also in attendance with us. And so I want to direct everyone after this meeting, if you have not had a chance to watch either in completion, the YouTube video of the complete February 10th meeting that is available. And then there are also sound bites or small short bites of specific points that Catherine Marion made, attorney Marion made, that are also available. This is where our first info session today is going to help us understand what the biggest concerns are. We certainly want to hear all of the concerns and kind of sort through them. But Susan and I need to reiterate that we are representing the Bylaws Committee, and we certainly we also have Pat King available here today. And Kathy is here today as well. I'm blanking on her last name. Robbins is here today. I'm sorry, Kathy. So we are working together as a 4-member team right now. And a few of you who have been writing emails to us have been reaching out. We certainly want to encourage that dialogue. We have had a lot to do in a very short amount of time. Again, our point is to be inclusive, to extend the conversation to you, and to try to give everyone a voice. But we do need to stay focused on the 4 topic items that are being presented in this particular conversation. It's the conversation that started on February 10th, and we are providing these info sessions to continue that. We do understand, though, that there is some confusion there's some concern about overlapping ideas or ideas that may extend into bigger or broader topics, we may be able to touch on that a little bit. But again, we want to direct you to the video of the meeting from February 10th so that you'll be able to see with confidence the answers that Catherine Marion provided for us. Again, that's Attorney Marion. We won't be able to provide those like quick, we can't hop back and forth today. We might be able to do some of that tomorrow, but I do think you as the membership will gain the most out of that by watching those video clips yourself to find what it is you're looking for if you're looking for a specific answer. So we're going to get started now by focusing on these 4 items. And then after each item, ask if there are any particular questions, specific questions relating to that one item. So moving forward, I'm just looking at the top of the file here where on the left margin, it says delete. The amendment proposed is that we take out that item. We're calling that item 1 for the 4 topics that we have, the 4 items that we have in our conversation. So you'll notice on the left margin, there are 3 delete boxes and 1 change dates box. So those are the 4 items that are the focus of this conversation that started on February 10th. So let me read the first one, please. All members of the association in good standing as of August 17, 1974, living in other areas of the town of Waterford, not included in the Pleasure Beach section as defined above, shall be exempt from the residential requirements set forth above. And by above, that just means that section above the yellow highlighting that explains what the boundaries are of the Waterford Association. And shall remain members as long as membership dues are paid in accordance with section 5. So we've been calling this the 1974 rule. We talked a bit about this, and I will say that the very first playlist item from Attorney Marion does address this. And what she explains is that this is antiquated language. It no longer affects our membership as our membership has the current boundaries. And so we're proposing this amendment with attention to the 200 members that we have already and the waiting list that we have. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
It's just that no one will lose their membership. We're sure of that by taking this out. If someone was still affected by it, we would deal with that. But in 2019, we did have some people and they were grandfathered in by resolutions, but we can talk about that a little later.
So at this time, we would like to just ask those of you who are here in attendance of the meeting, if you have any questions about what we're calling item number 1, this first item that's highlighted yellow on that file, if there are any questions about the 1974 rule at this time.
And I think if you want to talk, you can raise your hand. I should be able to see that and unmute you. I'm not seeing anything, so I think we're all set. And based on the poll last time, it didn't seem like there were too many people with issues on this one.
Okay, very good. So before we move on to item number 2, I would like to just say that Susan and I, again, we received some emails from either members of the community or groups of members of the community. There's been some request to actually read those emails or letters here in this forum. In the interest of time, for the focus of the key purpose of this info session to stay focused on each of the 4 items, we are not going to read those letters here and right now. But what we would like to do, of course, as your own concerns become applicable to each of the items on the list, we are encouraging you to talk about your specific points. But those letters will be posted on the Pleasure Beach webpage. We're even trying to plan like a file that will itemize all of the links and some notes, and then of course your letters that specifically relate to these items, these particular bylaw issues. So that will become available ideally in the next few days before the next info session, so that each of you could read these letters on your own time. I hesitate to read a letter when you don't have the actual page in front of you, because it may just be confusing. Some of the letters are actually rather long. So we don't want to have anyone feel that their voice is not being heard because their letter isn't being read. But if you did come to this meeting with specific intention of talking to your letter, then I just ask that you try to focus your concerns within your letter based on the various items that we're talking about. So since there wasn't any specific discussion about the first item, the 1974 item, we're going to move on to the second one. So I'm going to read this, unless would you like to read it? Go ahead, Susan. Okay, Susan will read that.
This is what we refer to as the 10-year rule, and it reads as follows. Any person who has been an assessed member for at least 10 years, but is now ineligible to be a member by virtue of their current residence, may renew his or her assessed membership annually if recommended by 2 current assessed members. So this provision was put into the bylaws in 1991. I unfortunately do not know the reasons that prompted it being added in, but it has been used by 3 members in the past, and that's who still are members. And in 2019, when we presented resolutions that would grandfather these 3 members in. So they all happen to live in Waterford, and they have now the right to continue as members as stated in the resolutions. But going forward right now, there's a possibility of 2 or 3 people who sold their homes in 2020 who might like to use this provision to retain their membership. We also looked at the statistics to see how large a group are we talking about. And it was found that over 70% are people whose membership is over 10 years old. So to a certain, they have the right to potentially use this language. So it comes down to really the whole question of, this is one of those where we have to decide, because the question is, what do you want our Pleasure Beach community to be? Do you want it to be a local organization of people who are active and participating? Or are you willing to allow remote members who would probably be inactive, but still could vote and participate in our decisions and our voting? So it's a question of what we think, of what we want our community to be like. And
I will just add at this time, because I see that Charlie is posting the link to the sound bite, we could call it, or the short snippet in the playlist where it's specifically addressing the 10-year rule, and Attorney Marianne talks about that. The language that she used in her explanation to us was that having such a rule gives more power to those who might use this to then leave, and perhaps she even says are living far away in Florida or Oregon or Vermont or somewhere, and making decisions based on the local community. So that just reiterates what Susan just said regarding our amending this to determine the kind of beach community that we are. Are we a community that is local, or are we going to encourage members to have the right in the future to leave but still maintain their membership here, and yet perhaps not be actively involved as a local member? So that is the purpose of the potential amendment, the suggestion to change this. And Attorney Marion again does explain this to greater length. So we now want to ask if there are people here at the meeting who have specific questions and or concerns about item number 2, the 10-year rule.
Someone has their hand raised. Now there's 2. So Bill Brett raised his hand first. I'm going to unmute you, Bill. If you're able, turn your video on, and we're just going to try to keep comments to under 2 minutes. And if we need to go back and forth, we'll just figure it out. There you go, Bill, you're on.
I'm Bill Brett. I'm unmuted, I hope.
Yes.
I don't see why anybody in their right mind would vote to give up their 10-year rights. When I joined, I never had the intention of selling or moving. But what if I decided to buy a house in Florida, live there 6 months of the year, 7 months of the year, become a resident for tax purposes, and decided to come home to Connecticut and live with my daughter for the summer outside of the area of the beach? Why would I want to give up my membership? I signed up for that. If you're going to grandfather the 200, I have no problems, but I don't see this ever passing. In my opinion is, why are we more worried about people on the waiting list being able to get in when if you have only 3 members using this right now, all you have to do is take away the voting privilege if you don't live in the district. In other words, if I take my membership and move to New London and I want to drive to Waterford to the beach, I should be able to pay my dues, because that's, $400 a year dues thereabouts. That's a pretty good commitment to the beach, but just take my voting shares away. And then if you're worried about the $1,500 assessment, you let the next person on the list in. Eventually, everybody with, I call them life memberships, everybody with these non-voting 10-year type memberships that have moved out, eventually those people will die or not be able to afford the $400 and give up that membership. And then you'll still stay at the 200 level or pretty close to it. That's my opinion. I will never vote for that. I'll vote for the first thing, and my wife will vote for the first one, and I'll vote to change when the dues are due. That's enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We appreciate you explaining the details involved in the way you interpreted the 10-year rule. And again, that's the purpose of this info session and this forum, is for people to share what their anticipation is or was of what that meant. That's one person's view of it. And again, you provide an opportunity that I feel, based on what we heard during the February 10th meeting and Attorney Marion's response, it sounded to me like she was encouraging us as a membership, as an organization, to listen to those kinds of requests from members who have been committed members, and allow for a possibility or the opportunity for the board to vote on grandfathering that situation. If you were to move to Florida, return for 6 months of the year to live with your daughter outside of the boundaries, that seems like an ideal opportunity for there to be a grandfather clause. Meanwhile, if we do not change or amend the current bylaw as written, it's open to a lot of different interpretations for a lot of different people. So I think what we've been talking as a bylaws committee is, and so you can kind of follow up on this, but how to make the language represent our whole organization. And that's really what's key about the bylaws. Is unfortunately, the bylaws cannot be individualized to each person's needs, but we do want to value our members, our current members. So my quick response to your situation, Bill, would be to have a vote to grandfather you in. And I don't think that would be a problem.
one thing about this particular clause, there's no number limits. There's no number about how many people could take their membership and go wherever they want. So that's troublesome because literally we could have 40% of these people who have lived here over 10 years decide to go to Vermont, California, Florida. And then they still get to participate. And they still are part of the 200 maximum. So if we don't want to count them as part of the 200 member maximum, then we're increasing the members that are who can use the beach, who could be there any weekend in the summer. And I will say the 200 member maximum, it seems it's one of the few things that I haven't heard people complain about or debate. Everybody seems to be happy with that number. So do we want to add 10 more of these people, remote members to it to have 210? Do we want to add 40 more who could come back for the summer and use it? So there are problems with what you suggest, Bill, but they all might be things that can be worked out in a new revision.
All right.
Hope that helps.
Okay, so I think there might be other questions. I can't see who's
Yes.
raising.
So David Lewis has his hand up. David, I'm going to unmute you right now. And the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, guys. Just one thing, my observation on the first meeting, it made it sound like that the reason why you wanted to remove this was if you move out of the area, you do not have a connection anymore to the beach. I mean, speaking for myself, I mean, I have family members that also own other houses in the beach community. So I didn't like that answer in particular because, and especially since I've been coming back and forth to the beach, I mean, for years, since I was a kid. That's the first thing. I asked the attorney on that call if there was a guarantee that the membership would vote to grandfather. She said there would be no guarantee of that. And I think several other people raised that as an issue because we grandfathered as a courtesy 3 people who have moved out of the area. So, you know, are those people going, if we lose our right, our 10-year right, and honestly, if you look at that 70%, I bet you it's 90% or maybe 80% of that 70%. They've been here for 15, 20, 25, 30 years plus. So 70% of the 10 of people being here 10 years sounds like a lot. But if you delve down into taking all the families that have been here, you will probably find that of that 70%, 90% of it or more has been here for an extended period of time, probably 20 years or more. So if you're going to take away our rights now for the 10 years, are you also going to remove the 3 people that were grandfathered? Because that to me is not fair either. And then, you know, just to go just go back on one of the comments you made, that the 10-year rule is open to interpretation. I don't see that rule as being open to interpretation. It basically says if you've been here for 10 years, then you can be a member. You can continue with your membership. For the most part, if you look at it historically, not that many people have utilized that. They either, if they move out of the area, they either say, you know what, yes, I want to be involved, or no, I don't. And if you look at it historically, I mean, it's a less than a handful of people that I think have adopted that rule. So I'm curious about the interpretation comment, because I look at it as it's black and white. If you've been a member in good standing for more than 10 years or more, you can continue to keep your membership if you move out of the area.
Okay, so there are a couple things there. There's actually a lot to unpack there, David, and I'm not sure we have time as there are more and more questions coming in. But the purpose of you saying the question is certainly for us to process and regroup for next week's meeting. So if we don't get to every detail, we can certainly address those questions moving forward. But in terms of your comment about open for interpretation, I think what we mean basically is that oftentimes in the past, my understanding is that the rule accommodated people moving locally, but outside of our boundaries. So they were living somewhere else in Waterford or New London or somewhere where there may still be a direct community tie. The open for interpretation part, though, is that if people decide to move more full-time to greater distances out of state, wherever that may be, there's less and less of a direct connection. So it really is just the way the bylaw is written. And I'd also like to add that there was a comment somewhere in your statement about we, being the bylaws committee, is taking away anyone's rights. And I'd really just like to clarify that that's not our goal and it's never been our job. So I think we absolutely would like to make it clear to the entire WAI membership that we have nothing to gain by trying to take anything away from anyone. We are presenting, again, an opportunity for people to talk about the bylaws as they are written. I am new to this, and I will say I have joined a committee of experts who have reviewed the details of these bylaws extensively. And Susan is a wealth of knowledge, as is Kathy and Pat. Other people have been involved in the past. So again, we are not taking anything away. We're providing an opportunity to talk about the way things are, the way it is written, and hope that you all as a committee, as committee members, will work with us to determine what this means and what we want our organization to be. If we see something that the attorney has highlighted for us, which in this case she has brought it to our attention, that this could ultimately be problematic. And her question directly to us was, what kind of organization is Waterford Association Incorporated? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be a group of people that live throughout the country or possibly even the world? Or are you a local beach community?
Thank you, Sarah. There are a couple questions in the chat that maybe we can answer quickly. One came from Judy Sullivan asking about the origins and of the 200 member number. Can you address that?
Where did the 200 number come from? The 200 number.
I'd have to go back and check through old bylaws to see when the 200 max was added, but we believe it was maybe early 2000s, and one of our members just threw it out there as a good number, and it stuck. And at that point, we probably never imagined that we would get to 200. And in fact, the language, anything connected with the 200 member, no one paid attention to it because it didn't matter. We weren't close to that limit, and it just, the language stayed, and but now that we are at 200, we have to consider those consequences. So if you allow more with the 10-year rule, if you allow more and more people to hold on to a membership as they move out of the area, they're holding part of the 200.
Okay.
Unless you change it and expand it.
So it didn't matter then. It was kind of arbitrary, but it matters now. Judy also made the comment in the chat, just because the chat doesn't show up in the video. There are a significant number of members who never go to the beach. Not fair to exclude a new member who wants to join and actually use the beach. So it's something to think about. Norma Cummings also asked a good question. Would ineligible by virtue of current residence apply to quote unquote snowbirds whose primary domicile is elsewhere, perhaps for tax reasons, but who also own property within PB current boundaries and who are here during summers, active and participating?
Well, I would think to the point of Norma's comment, if a person is within the current Pleasure Beach boundaries and are active and have an active membership, then they would be active members and there wouldn't be a concern about going to Florida.
Right. and they own the house, so there's no problem.
Right, right. I think that's the issue. So again, to just read clearly the 10-year rule, it's any person who has been an assessed member for at least 10 years, but is now ineligible to be a member by virtue of their current residence. In other words, they have left the Pleasure Beach boundaries, they've moved out, may renew his or her assessed membership annually if recommended by 2 current assessed members. So, you know, this really is more about the numbers. The 200 number, we have reached that 200 number. So now we have to ask ourselves how that works to accommodate these various concerns. And the one bylaw is not addressing all of it. So that's why we believe the bylaw needs to be amended, preferably deleted, but certainly discussed as it is now to add, well, is voting shares something that we could omit? Are there other variables that are important to the membership that could be added to a 10-year clause? So again, that's why we are talking about this.
Awesome. Okay, there's a couple more people with their hands up. Mr. Holbrook, Bill, I'm going to unmute you now. If you can make your video work, we'd love to see your face, but the floor is yours. You should be unmuted. Oh. Bill?
Charlie?
Hey, okay, there you are.
Okay. I guess the concern that I have when listening to the discussion is Pleasure Beach has always kind of been a residentially based organization. You know, people that lived at the beach or within whatever the boundaries are were eligible to be members. And to start talking about a sort of a legacy membership that's not linked to a residence seems to complicate it. I understand the emotional impact of all that, because the best thing about Pleasure Beach is the people that have been here for generations or whatever. But if you divorce membership from ownership in some form, then you're opening up this whole numbers thing, as you said, that I think is something that's going to be problematic. We're snowbirds, so I'm glad to hear that we own a house. So I'm glad that that is not going to be an issue. But
you used to rent every summer.
What's that?
I said you used to rent every summer.
We used to, yeah. Right, and then now we own. But if you get into the idea of, you know, we have no expectation, we never had any expectation if we did not own a house in the area that we would continue to be members, much as it would be difficult for us to lose that connection. You know what I mean? Because it's a residential community thing. So I'm a little not puzzled, but I'm a little concerned that the idea that it should be extended to people that, I mean, people that have the links to the beach but no longer live there will have continued links to people that are there and can obviously probably attend the beach as guests. But why membership would be necessary, I don't quite get. Anyway, that's all I have to say about it. I know it's a very emotionally linked kind of argument. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy and Bill.
Thank you. Are there other questions about the 10-year rule?
Yes, there's one more hand up. It's Bill Brett again. So Bill's going to make one more comment, and then it doesn't seem to be anything else, and maybe we can move on. Bill, you're unmuted.
Okay, this is just a suggestion as an addition to the 10-year rule. If we're going to have a 10-year rule or any rule, my opinion is we are missing out. We're not supporting our existing members who may sell their property. If I sell my property and I want to be able to sell my property and market it with a realtor who is going to say that there's membership to Pleasure Beach available. All right. My membership, and this is something I wrote in my memo to you guys, my membership I should be able to take my membership if I don't take it with me for the 10 years, you know, after 10 years, which I wouldn't. But if I don't take it with me, I should be able to sell my house, for example, and the person buying it should have a 30-day right to pay their full assessment, not 1/3, and their dues, and join the beach before. It would help everybody who has been a member, especially 10-year members who want to sell their house, because lately there's been some people who have looked at houses and found out they would have to be on a lengthy waiting list and have not bought houses from members. So that's one thing that I'd like to see. And that's why when I said, if you have 3 members, two that have moved out this year, I understand, who want to keep their membership, well, that's fine. Let the 2 new people on the list come in. If my person that buys the house doesn't want to pay the membership, it goes to the next person on the list. I'm just saying that, we're taking things out, but these bylaws there's so much interpretation of what, why is it 200? Why is it this? I will say anything more than 200, you have 60 cars that you can put in that parking lot. I know. And unless you're going to dig into it and add parking, you're not going to have enough parking for everything else.
Okay, Bill, thank you. So the transfer of membership, as I understand it, is outside of the scope of what they're trying to address, and is certainly something that I believe a phase 2 bylaws discussion, maybe even during the season, it sounds like there might be some suggested edits to this. So we're really just trying to focus on these 4 things. Transfer of membership is a broader membership issue. I think that putting all these great thoughts into writing and allowing Susan and Sarah to create a forum where they can post all the letters and thoughts that people have and try to organize them is going to be really important. Do you guys want to add anything? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, exactly what I would have said.
Right, but I will just add that in regard to Bill's comment, this idea of the transfer of membership is just one indicator of how the bylaws do need to be amended to address the current needs of our current organization. So the bylaws, as Attorney Marion told us on February 10th, should actually be changing with us. To assume that the bylaws will not change is just basically allowing our organization to just stay in a rut of the past, where the laws were made for the people who were prior members and will not address our current needs. So the reason we're here is to actually discuss this and address the variables, and why one rule, one 10-year rule, can have so many extenuating circumstances or needs associated with it. So again, that's why we would like to amend what we're calling item 2, which is the 10-year rule. Now we're going to move on to item 3. As you look at the file on your screen, it actually is in section 4, and it's number 2 of section 4, having to do with the classifications of membership. And you'll notice that the highlighted yellow section is what we propose as a bylaws committee to be deleted. I will read it. Associate members who pay only dues and have the right to vote, but may not use the beach unless they are also members of an assessed household. The total number of assessed households shall be limited to 200, with a grandfather clause that states people who now reside with the original boundaries will be allowed to join regardless of the total number. So again, the item to be changed would be the words highlighted in yellow. And we're calling this the original boundaries rule, with specific attention to those words because of the question and concern and research done by Attorney Marion to itemize for us, or to declare for us, that in, I think it was 1949, the original boundaries referred to the entire town of Waterford. So the concern here is that if we have 200 members, which we currently do, with this grandfather clause as written, anyone residing in the town of Waterford outside of our membership boundaries could jump into the membership pool without having to wait on a waiting list. And we believe this wording is antiquated and no longer serves our purpose.
All right.
Thank you, Charlie, for you just posted on the chat the link to the specific soundbite in the playlist where Attorney Marion addresses that.
Yeah, and so thank you very much for putting those clips together, Sarah. Of the main video from the meeting, 18 people viewed it, and everything else, anywhere between 3 and 10 people looked at the video. So they're definitely people are using it, and I think it's worthwhile. I'm just posting the links there, so anyone who may have missed it might have easier access to it. David Lewis has his hand up. Dave, I'm going to unmute you now.
Okay. Did Attorney Marion, so when I looked at the 1949 bylaws, the 1974, the 1983, I don't have the copy of the 1991 bylaws because the grandfathering for the 200 members was not in any of the bylaws from 1949 to 1983. So the only suggestion would be is either in 1991 or after. And I don't ever remember it being after. I was president and vice president during 1991, I think, or somewhere around there. I don't ever remember it changing. I know Pam was president in 1991, but did the Attorney Marion review the minutes from the meeting when that rule was adopted?
I'm sorry, the rule that we're talking about right now?
Yeah, the 200 member rule.
We'd have to research that.
Well, I just know from what she said in the February 10th meeting, she did mention that there was some lack of clarity from 1949. Again, the emphasis here is what the words original boundaries mean. And the belief is that it is too vague. And in terms of this particular item in the bylaws as written regarding our membership, it allows for, again, an outside group to join in regardless of the maxed out number of 200. So it's the purpose of the bylaws doesn't serve, that bylaw as it is written right now doesn't serve who we are as an organization right now. And the vagueness of the language could actually cause a serious problem.
The only thing I'm suggesting is, I don't know how she can make that comment if she doesn't have the minutes from the meeting where it was discussed for the membership, prior for the membership to vote.
Okay.
Do you
should have
have
been
those minutes?
What's that?
Do you have those minutes?
No, I don't. I mean, but I would have thought that she would have, the only thing I can think of is that those changes were made in 1991 because they weren't made in 83. They weren't made in 74. And Barbara Keck was the secretary, I think from 1984 for a period of 26 years. She has to have the secretary minute book that should have information in there. And the only thing I'm asking is, when she made that statement, did she review any?
I will look into that and see how much I can find out about
Okay,
1991.
And my only question was, did she, it's either 91 or after, but my only question is when she made the statement, did she know that 200 membership or the original boundaries language possibly came in after 84 or potentially as early as 91 or after?
Okay. And
if there should be minutes from that meeting, and it could have clarified what the original boundaries were. I sort of disagree. I think the 1949 bylaws, it talks about membership, and basically I think there's a difference between what the definition of membership is and what the definition of a boundary is. In 49, it was opened up to the entire membership was opened up to the entire town of Waterford. But that doesn't mean specifically that the entire boundaries were the entire town of Waterford. Boundaries weren't introduced, or at least until 1974 or right before 74, because there was an amendment to the 70. There's a notation that the 74 boundaries the 74 bylaws had been amended. It's just that you don't know.
That's our number one item. That was put in August 1974 when they were amended to bring in from something larger, such as a town, to what they then defined as Pleasure Beach in 1974. So we don't think there were any other amendments between 1949 and 1974. And when they decided to define boundaries for our area, they added that language to make sure that no one was cut out and not allowed to be a member who had been a member. So it all makes sense when you put the two together. But I will do some research on the 1991 and minutes to take Catherine, Attorney Marion off the hook. She didn't do research, it was just us. And we did the best we could in finding out what those original boundaries were. But if you want to ask her, and she said it at the last meeting, in the eyes of the law, boundaries don't make a difference. Boundaries can't be relied upon. They can be changed and amended at any time by the members. So in her point of view, it really doesn't matter what the original boundaries were. Does that make sense? Well,
he's muted, but yeah, I think that does make sense. I also think it ties into a comment made by Annie Gorley, where she's kind of noting something similar, where aren't the original boundaries kind of tied to the 1974 rule, which I think you clarified. So, you know, maybe that wording when it was added and fixed wasn't really clear. Judy Sullivan also made a comment asking if original boundaries could be changed to current boundaries, with the boundaries clearly defined as they are currently.
Well, to that point, if we're thinking about what the bylaw for this section 3, or I'm sorry, section 4, number 2 is trying to itemize, it's talking about the assessed households and limiting it to 200. And then the grandfather clause adds stating that people who now reside within the original boundaries will be allowed to join regardless of the total number. So if you change that to current boundaries, it would either, I'm not sure if it's just redundant or wouldn't make sense, or I'm not sure what the purpose of that clause would serve. Again, the hope is to try to clarify the boundaries. I'm sorry, try to clarify the bylaws so that we can read them and understand exactly what they mean and how it will affect our membership. And a quick note, yeah, it would seem like just change original to current, but then if you read the whole bylaw, it doesn't seem to address what the bylaw is trying to do.
And John King just made the comment in the chat, if you change the language from the original to current, you could possibly have everyone within the current boundaries join, which is over 600 houses. So it's how important is that 200? Another question in the chat is from Norma Cummings, and it says, was consideration given to changing the wording to reflect the boundaries stated in 1974 bylaws? And then she made a note outside of the scope of today's combo, which I'll make sure I pass along to you guys. So I think it's kind of the same. It seems related to the 1974 clause with the original boundaries, but the main question is, do you want the 200 number to be firm, or can it be expanded kind of arbitrarily within a certain geographical range?
yeah, because this language at grandfathering in people is an exception to the 200, and there's no limit on how many exceptions can be made. But also, you have to start thinking about what she said, that boundaries really, you can't depend on them. They're not for life. They're not for decades. They're there as they are until another group of members decides to amend them and change them. And she says property rights really come from deeds and sometimes contracts. And so perhaps, I don't know, maybe there are people from generations back who do have some kind of written language in their deeds. I mean, that's really a good place to look, but that's where you get your property rights and not by boundaries in a bylaws.
And David Lewis just made a good point in the chat. The attorney did say that no one should lose their membership due to any of these changes that are being proposed or a change in boundaries.
Oh yeah, she was very concerned about that.
And she advised the association that this is the opportunity when you grandfather individuals and you, we as an organization determine each need based on each household that may propose such a need, but to have just a blanket grandfather clause stating how people with over and beyond the 200 membership could have the ability to jump a waiting list or hop in at any time, we have to decide if that's what we think is good or best for our organization. Are there any more questions about item number 3?
I don't see anything.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Then the last item is at the bottom of the page. Do you want to read it? This is about
The last item is about changing the payment dates, and essentially it's proposed that we move them backwards by 2 months. So instead of having them due June 1st, May 1st. Oh, wait a minute.
July 1st, August 1st.
Okay, we want to change from when they first were due July 1st and bring it back to May 1st. And so forth. The next stage where you might be classified as delinquent, to change it from August 1st to June 1st. And finally, if you haven't paid them by the 3rd date, which was originally September 1st, to bring it back to July 1st, you would be, your membership would be terminated. And this is being done because it just makes more sense financially for the organization to get funds in to use during the current year. And also it allows new members, it doesn't hold a spot by an old member who, or a current member who may not even renew by September. While meanwhile, there are people on a wait list. There are new people who would like to join. They might as well be able to take advantage of the summer rather than, you know, no one wants to start in September. So those were the 2 main reasons for doing that.
2 comments. One's a suggestion from Annie Gorley. Could we add something, a statement, there'll be a 30-day notice of the total amount due prior to May 1? So maybe that's probably linked to our new budgeting procedures, but what are the dues going to be? And then Bill Brett said billing dates are a no-brainer. Members should be paid up before the beach opens. Let's see. The treasurer, David Lewis, feels that the last day of payment should be just prior to the official opening of the beach, which historically has been the 3rd week in June.
Well,
and Annie Darling thinks the treasurer knows best.
the reason we picked the dates we did as a committee was we wanted it to be simple and clear, and that dates that people were familiar with, the 1st of a month, and that they could easily remember. If this were passed the way it is, and you found next year or 2 years from now, you'd rather have it be June 15th instead of July 1st, that's an easy fix. It's an easy change, but we thought it would make it easier for the members to remember and deal with, and they were comfortable with this pattern of
the 1st of the month.
The 1st of the month, and every month it changes.
Okay, I think, and in that case, we're really just talking about 15 days or maybe less. You're saying July 1st, you become delinquent. I believe David's saying that you would become delinquent upon the beach opening on maybe January or June 20th. It's not an easy change.
Again, the expectation is people pay by May 1st. So really, hopefully there isn't an issue in June anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So become delinquent June 1st and lose membership on July 1st.
Right. So hopefully this is a non-issue.
And then so if dues are due on May 1st, there's a reiteration of the comment. Would you consider adding language to say that there should be maybe 30-day notice or at least some notice of what the dues will be prior to May 1st? I think Pat's raising her hand physically. So I'm gonna unmute her.
She's waving it.
Yes.
I am.
You gotta figure out how to do.
I don't know how to get on video wise. If you can't see my face, can you hear me?
We can hear
see
you
you.
now. You're
Okay.
on the screen.
We have to vote the budget for the year before the season ever opens up. So the members are going to be able to see what the expenses are. They're going to know how much it costs to join the beach. And if we say May 1 that they pay, they still have until June 1. That gives them 30 days to get that in. And if they're still delinquent, July 1, and that's it. That, I think for the first time we do this, we can always change the dates later, but because this is the first time we're doing it, I think that that's appropriate, even if the letter, when you send out the dues, the letter on what is requested from everyone, that you put in it a notice at the top. Remember, the dues are changing, the due dates are changing for our annual dues this year. So we could put it in bold, it could be put in bold print. These are the new dates that have to be done, and you're still getting 60 days, 30 and 30, you're still getting all of May, all of June to finalize that.
Thank you, Pat. And again, the consistency of the first of the month really is intended to help the membership just realize that was the expectation before. But honestly, waiting until September 1st to determine that someone is delinquent
Yes.
and should be removed is really way too late. And I think a lot of us agree with that.
Well,
Okay. So the new bylaws have a special meeting the third Saturday in April, I believe it is, and we can send this out to make sure it's obviously clear. When the membership will have the right to vote on the budget every year. This is the first year that's happening. So I believe this year that's April 24th is the day that sticks in my mind. So that's the day where the membership can either approve or reject the current year's budget as put together by the finance committee, approved by the board, sent to the membership with 30-day notice. If 51% of all assessed members vote against that budget, then it reverts to the prior year's budget. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's see. All right.
So in regard to the questions about why the bylaws committee is deciding when monies will be paid, we're deciding to amend the way the bylaw is written currently. We're not deciding when the money should be paid. That's up to each member to decide when they send in their check.
All right. Well,
So we have talked about all four of the items. It looks like Pat might have an additional comment.
No, I wanted to agree with you, Sarah, that this has been in the bylaws. This is not something new that we're taking upon ourselves. It's already there. All we're trying to do is amend the dates. That's it. It's always been a vote to do that. So it's in our bylaws. It's not new. And I think the membership should be able to vote in on that.
And we also had quite a bit of discussion. So to everyone out there sharing your comments, again, this is a forum for a purpose. We welcome that. We want to hear your opinions. And I just hope you can appreciate the fact that there have been several discussions about this. And in so doing, we talked about what does it feel like as a member to be told something in April about a beach association? Well, most of us aren't, necessarily thinking yet in beach mode in April. Of course, if we're right here, we're local, we're walking on the beach, yes, but many people come in just for the summer only. So the idea of an April date just didn't appeal to any of us. We thought May 1st, again, remained consistent with the original July 1st date. And again, we're just backing it up 2 months by virtue of the date that was already established. But there has been quite a bit of discussion about it, and so just sensitivity towards people transitioning from spring to summer and all that goes into that. So that's the amendment that we're proposing, and we appreciate your conversation. So if there aren't any further questions at this point, I believe we have talked about each of the 4 items, and this concludes our conversation.
Yes, and
So Annie, just her comment about having a notice, I don't think was directly addressed.
okay. Well,
Oh, I thought it was.
I
I'm sorry.
think, so.
In terms of the 30 days.
So I think what would happen in reality is that around the beginning of April, the financial secretary would send out forms asking people to renew their membership, telling them what the dues are and any other fees. And people could pay it right away, or they could wait to May 1st, June 1st, or July 1st, given their situation. But I think the mailing of the actual forms, or how I guess it's email nowadays, that will be notice. But if you want an additional notice, the membership committee and the financial secretary could put together a little outline or a little separate notice to be sent
Right.
out so that everybody understands, because at that point they will know what the budget amount is for the coming year.
Correct.
But it's a
Right.
good suggestion, and maybe it becomes part of that form,
Okay,
or maybe it's
so I
separate.
think, I think this definitely is going to be a topic next week. Annie's saying the budget doesn't necessarily include dues, so let's get her an answer there. Adding bylaws section. Right, the board directors determines the dues, so I think that's something that might require further discussion. Annie Darling says that as the financial secretary, she cannot send out any forms until the budget is approved, which happens on the 3rd Saturday of April. And David Lewis has his hand up. I'm gonna unmute him. And we have a couple extra minutes, so whoever wants to stay on, please do. The recording will be posted again, so no one will miss anything if they have to go, if they're only planning on staying on until 3. David, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. In terms of how strategically this will work is once the budget is approved, which is the 3rd Saturday in September, we will then,
April.
every member will then know what the what the assessment is per household.
September?
So
I think you
You
meant
have to
March.
say April.
in March, no, in April, on April
April.
24th, and April 24th, if the budget is passed, every association member, because in the budget, in the narrative portion of the budget, it will state what the assessment is per household. What the members are, Sue, you were part of the committee, part of the board last year. That same budget that I produced last February will be, it's even more detailed now in terms of what the membership will see. They're not going to get a 1-pager. They're actually going to get a full narrative on every line item that's in that budget and what's going to be spent on that line item. They will also have copies of proposals and or contracts that we will enter into for services for the year, for the 2021 season.
Mhm.
So effective, so the dues will be due May 1st, on or before May 1st. There's 30 days if it's not due by June 1st. Then, but typically when I was financial secretary, I sent out notices that you need to pay your dues. And I'm assuming that but that's an operational thing. And that can be handled with the duties of the financial secretary. I don't think that should be part of a bylaw change. I mean, that's just collecting the,
He's walking
that's just
around.
operational item, collecting fees in the monies into the association. So the majority of the people will pay fairly quickly.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so I think also to reiterate what Sarah said earlier is please collect your thoughts, any potential issues you have with any of these changes, and email them in over the next week and after next meeting. You know, just from my communications with the committee, I know they're committed to fostering this conversation, expanding it as wide as it needs to be, and trying to encapsulate all these comments, whether they're in the scope of what's happening now or whether there's something that's going to be addressed at a later date. So definitely, you know, write your thoughts down, send them in, and we have another meeting the same time next Sunday, 2 to 3 o'clock. It was in that same email. So, you know, please share it. Please share the link and join. Susan and Sarah, do you want to say anything else, or are there any other questions?
Well, just thank everybody for coming, participating, sharing their ideas. It's turning out to be a good process. And also, in addition to, you know, remember to go back if you want to and listen to Attorney Marion on those links, and look for letters being posted on the website.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate
Thank
your time
you.
and your input.
thanks. Good job.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Sunday.
You do.